Hey folks, the randomness of Facebook never fails to surprise me. And Facebook has led me to acquire 21 kilograms of icing sugar. Tate & Lyle icing sugar, just like you get on the cakes. So I'm just looking at this bag of icing sugar for the ingredients, and it contains icing sugar 97% and maize starch. Now, I don't really know what maize starch is, but what I'd really like to know is, can I brew with this as an alternative to normal granular sugar or dextrose monohydrate? So in this film today, I'm going to attempt to make a tomato paste wash, the kind of paste wash that you put in an air still to make spirits from. So if it ends up tasting horrible, but it still ferments, then I can still it and I can still make something with it. This may or may not work. I've got absolutely no idea whatsoever. Let's find out. So here are my key ingredients for this most experimental brew. Well, first of all, I'm not using 21 kilos, but I am going to use 6 kilos of icing sugar, 2 of those bags. It's a tomato paste wash, so I need tomato puree. Now, I would ordinarily put a full tube in. Instead, I'm going to put half a tube in, and I'm going to supplement it with yeast nutrient. The yeast that I'm going to use today isn't the typical yeast I would use for this, but I've got lots of this, and I want to use it before it goes off. So it's craft ale yeast number 3 from Bigger Jugs. So I've been using this yeast all summer in cider, and it ferments great. The final gravity is, generally speaking, below 1.000, so it's using up the fermentable sugars. I don't think it'll have a problem with this. Plus, it's now autumn. The temperatures aren't great, and this is a bit more tolerant than some other wine yeast I've got. If, for whatever reason, this doesn't get going, then I have got other yeast I can fall back on. One more ingredient that I failed to mention is coming out of that tap. It's good old Council Pop plain tap water. Now, I'm using that instead of spring water because I'm making a wash. It's going through a still, so I'm not really bothered if it doesn't taste amazing before it gets stilled. My fermenting vessel of choice will be the Rich's fermentation bin. So let's crack on. First things first, I need to get some water in my big pan. I'm going to get warm water in there rather than cold water. And then while that pan is filling, I'm going to open my first big bag of icing sugar, and it feels like a solid block. So this could be interesting. So that's what I'm faced with. Right, I think that's enough water in the pan, so that's coming off. Now we're going to see what happens when I try and get this in there. Is it going to come out in one lump or will it come out in pieces? I think it's going to need some encouragement. Now, what I don't want to happen is 2 kilos of icing sugar fall out of this bag and splash me, but that's probably what's going to happen. It's a tough old bag. I've known a few of them in my town. No, this is going to be a big lumper. Oh, blimey. Oh, I knew that was going to happen. Well, that's made a nice big mess in my kitchen. I reckon this is going to take a bit of bashing around to get it to dissolve properly. Oh. Right, I'm going to attempt to get another one in there. Right, that's it. So that's now 6 kilos of icing sugar in the big pan. I've now got the big pan on my gas hob, so I'm going to put the gas on. Woof. I want to turn it down because I don't want to burn the bottom of the pan. And what I'm going to have to keep doing now is stirring it, because I don't want the icing sugar to stick to the bottom of the pan and the heat from the flame to burn it onto the bottom of the pan. So I'm going to have to keep moving it round. Now, I want this water to end up pretty much clear, or at least opaque. As you can see, it's currently very white, but hopefully with heat I can make this all dissolve nicely. So I'm going to come back to you in a bit. See you then. Hey folks, it's a good couple of hours later. The mixture is now 85 degrees Celsius. It's not far off hitting a simmer and it's still that colour. I think one or two things has happened. I've either made a saturated solution and I can't dissolve any more of the icing sugar in it, or the cloudiness is from the maize starch. As I move it around with the stirrer, it feels really buoyant. So I think what I'm going to do is to take the heat off. I'm going to put this on top to let the heat escape. I'm going to move it to the back ring, which is not the hot ring. This is going to be too hot to go into a plastic bucket tonight, so I'll pick this up tomorrow, so I'll catch you then. Morning folks, it's preparation day 2, brew day 1. It's time to get all this put together into my richest fermentation bucket. So the big pan of liquid is heavy. Oh, it's a bit sticky as well around the edges, but it's essentially just warm. It's not hot by any means. In fact, it's not much more than room temperature, just registering a little bit. So it's safe to pour straight into the bucket. So that's my first job. Right, here goes nothing. So because I'm using tap water, I'm just going to give the bucket a bit of a rinse in the bottom. There is some sugar stuck on the bottom a bit. This could be a saturated solution, you know. It might not just be maize starch. It's entirely possible. We'll find out. Okay, I've put hot water into the pan just to melt that was stuck to the bottom. Right, in it goes. So I'm going to get some cold water or some tepid water going in here now. And while that's going in, I'm going to add my tomato puree. Plop, plop. I'm going to shut this off at 21 litres, which it's at now. So there we go. I won't put any more liquid in. So I'm going to put all of this yeast nutrient in. There's a good probably 3 or 4 heaped dessert spoonfuls equivalent gone in there. So I'm going to give it all a big stir around so it's a consistent mixture. The sugar and the tomato paste and the water, of course. It's a nice salmon colour. Right, I can't see any more bits of tomato paste now, so I think I'm good to go. So in goes the hydrometer. Nice and buoyant. I like that. And I'm starting on an original gravity of 1.104. I'm now going to add a good sprinkling of yeast in there. And this is ale yeast, but it does do high tolerance ales. If it finishes fermenting early, I'll just put some wine yeast in. I think it'll be all right. So I'm just going to give this a little stir so that the yeast starts to think about sinking. There we go. Now it's going to take at least 24 hours for this to activate. One thing about this ale yeast is it is a slow activator, and then it goes really slowly for about 4 or 5 days, and then you get 3 or 4 days of absolute intense activity and then stop. That's what I've observed with ciders anyway. Right, I'm going to get the lid snapped into place. Such good bins these. A bit of water in the airlock. That'll do. Right, I'm going to have a tidy around and get this labelled up. I'll come back to you in a second. Right, I'm all done. Let's have a look. So it's a tomato paste wash with icing sugar, just to remind myself. The original gravity is 1.104 and today's date is the 18th of October 2023. I'll come back to you when fermentation begins, probably tomorrow. If not, it'll be the day after. So I'll see you then. Morning from the kitchen, folks. This is brew day 4 for my icing sugar tomato paste wash, and it's not going very well. In fact, it's just not going. The airlock hasn't moved whatsoever. The seal seems tight enough for me. So one of two things has happened here. Either the icing sugar simply isn't fermentable, or the yeast really doesn't like it. So I'm going to try putting some different yeast in now. I was going to open some wine yeast, but it's a brand new packet and I'm not going to be using it for a while. So instead, I'm going to go caveman and put some bread yeast in there. So I'm just going to get the lid off. Oh, sometimes easier said than done. Oh. The smell suggests that there's possibly something happening, and there's something on top which is a bit foamy, but it's not quite what I'd call krausenal. I'll show you. But by brew day 4, I would expect this to be doing something. I mean, I've never had any problems with the airlock seal before with these buckets, and I think it would be a bit of a coincidence if that was the issue. I don't think that is the issue at all. I just think that the yeast isn't that keen. It's difficult to tell from the smell. It does smell like there's been some sort of activity. Maybe it just is really, really slow. Anyway, the point in the exercise was to see if I can make a tomato paste wash from icing sugar. It doesn't matter what yeast I'm using. So I'm now going to put some bread yeast in. This is just Sainsbury's fast-acting bread yeast. I'm just going to sprinkle a bit on top. Not too much, I've got to make a loaf tomorrow. That'll do. And I'll just give it a little swish around so that it sinks in. Yeah, you can really smell the bread yeast in comparison to the beer yeast. It's got a much more pungent odour. Yeasty. Right, lid back on. So that is in place. The airlock looks fine to me, the grommet looks fine. I can't see any issues with that. So I'm going to pop this back on. And I'll put this away over here and we'll have an update hopefully later today. But let's see, as soon as I see some bubbles, I'll come back to you. Hey folks, it's brew day 5 for my tomato paste wash with icing sugar. And the airlock is still not doing anything. So I'm taking the lid off today and I'm going to take a gravity reading to see if it has actually done any fermenting since I started. There's a definite krausen today. Now this is interesting. So it is fermenting. So I reckon it must be a grommet problem then on here. So this started off on 1.104. Let's see what it is now. Well, it looks like the gravity's increased, unless it's exactly the same and I wrote it down wrong, which is a fair chance because it's actually 1.114. But that does look krausenal. So I'm going to give it yet another stir and mix it around. I think I've recorded the original gravity wrong and it was 1.114 all along. My mistake. But that on the top did look like there was something happening. So I'm just giving it a right good stir around now, and a good mix around. I want the sedimenty stuff that was in the bottom to rise up. I want everything to mix together. I'm going to put the lid back on and see what happens. I feel slightly more encouraged today than yesterday. Just slightly though. I'll come back to you later. I'm back. It's only been a couple of minutes. Nothing's happening exciting wise, but I'm just giving you an update that I've put this now on a heat pad. It is autumn, so maybe that will also assist it. Right, next update tonight or tomorrow. Okay folks, brew day 5 later that night. A good 14 hours later, there's action. So that's quite a big gassy exchange. It's sporadic, but it's happening. I don't know whether it's down to the time or to the heat or what. I'll come back to you with an update tomorrow, try and look a bit further into it. See you then. Hey folks, it's brew day 7 and fermentation is definitely happening. I mean, it's coming through lovely. I'm getting some big gassy bubbles coming through every few seconds. So I'm happy enough with that for sure. So I think the heat mat's definitely helped. It's taken a bit of time to get going, but it could be the time of year, it could be the yeast, it could be something about the icing sugar. I don't know, but I do know that it is fermenting. I'll come back to you at the end of fermentation and then we'll test the product. Catch you then. Good evening from the kitchen, folks. It's brew day 31 for my tomato paste wash made with icing sugar, and fermentation has completely and utterly ended. Let's have a look at that airlock. You'll see that there is a very slight inkling of positive pressure, but nothing bubble-wise has come through here for days. So today I'm going to rack it from the big vessel into demijohns, leave it for a few days to clear before I'm actually going to use it in my air still. Now, this is the last part of the film that you're going to see today, but what I will do is take the final gravity, show you how it worked out with the icing sugar, and I might even have a little cheeky taste as well. So I'm just going to get the lid off the Rich's fermentation bin. Oh, there we go. Smells just like any other tomato paste wash I've ever done. So this is what it looks like. You can see that it's got some bits and pieces floating in it, but it's actually risen where the Krausen ring is around the edges. It doesn't look too bad, to be honest, in terms of opaqueness. So my first job is to drop the hydrometer in there and see what the final gravity is. Low. This has gone all the way, I think. And I'm looking at a final gravity of exactly 1.000. So let's work out the ABV. So I started on an original gravity of 1.114. I deduct from that 1.000, which equals 0.114. And then I multiply that number by 131.25, which gives me a final alcohol by volume of 14.9%. Excellent. Let's just say 15%, 14.96. 15%, that is bang on. Absolutely spot on for a tomato paste wash. And that is every bit as good as what I've ever achieved with either brewing sugar or standard granulated sugar. So icing sugar does work and it produces a high strength brew, even using the yeast that I used, a combination of ale yeast and bread yeast. So I'm pretty impressed by that. So today I'm transferring out of the big bucket via a jug into demijohns. I've got 4 demijohns, so between them that's 18 litres. And I think what I've got here, there's about 20 or so litres in there. There's probably going to be at least 2 litres of sludgy stuff in the bottom that I don't want. So I'll just see how it goes. So I'm not going to film me doing all of the demijohns because that's fairly pointless. I'm also going to use a sieve as well to pour through. And the sieve is just to keep the chunkier stuff out of the demijohns. I'm not bothered if a little bit gets in. But if I can keep some out, that's better. So that's my first demijohn done. I'm just going to give it a little rinse. Get the sticky off it. So I'll get the airlock in there. That's number 1 done. I've got to do another 3 exactly the same way. So when I've done those 3, I'll come back to you. Welcome to the entrance porch, folks. This is where my tomato paste wash is now going to be left to settle. It's cold in here compared to the rest of the house. We're now in autumn. I think this is a good time for it to sort of cold crash a little bit indoors here, hopefully. And if it does, great. If it doesn't, I'm still going to run it through the air still anyway. But the film's just about over. I just wanted to show you what I'd got out. And I did actually empty the bucket in the end. So that's the first one that came out, number 1. I've labelled it and then gone and managed to rub some off, but there we go. but it's 15% and we know that. That was number 2. Number 3, and number 4 is dead cloudy. You can see that that one is proper milkshake. I mean, I need to be careful because this is going to bring all the boys to the yard. It's that milkshakey. But hopefully these will just be fine to go in the still. But before I finish the film, got one more thing to do. I need to have a little taste test. So here's some that I prepared earlier. I mean, in terms of smell, it just smells like a tomato paste wash always smells. It's not going to be a pleasant drink, but I'll see how it compares. There's still sugar left in it. It's actually sweet. It's medium sweet and actually quite drinkable. Weirdly, it doesn't taste like tomatoes. It tastes like a dessert wine, actually. Yeah, it's a medium sweet wine, just like a dessert wine. I reckon if I'd used Lalvin EC1118 or wine yeast in there, I'd have probably got another 2 or 3% out of that. But yeah, interesting. So it doesn't taste that bad at all. It's quite quaffable. It was made with icing sugar, tap water, ale yeast and bread yeast. I mean, that is Frankenstein, but it's turned out okay. Drinkable. It'll be fine going through the air still, and I'm going to make some good spirits with it, but that's going in another film. Anyway, cheers folks. Hope you've enjoyed the film. You can use icing sugar in brews. It does work, despite what the experts might say. Right. Catch you on the next film. The film that you've just watched is a Moss Home and Garden production. You can find more by going to www.mosshomeandgarden.co.uk. I'd just like to say thank you very much for supporting my YouTube channel and for watching my films. It really is very much appreciated. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to my YouTube channel in order to receive future updates about the home and garden films which I upload. You can find my YouTube channel by going to www.mosshomeandgarden.co.uk. Please click on the red subscribe button. When you've done that, a little bell will appear. If you press that also, then you'll get future updates about the films which I upload. If you like my films, if you like my style of filming, then you might also like my travel channel, which you will find by going to youtube.com/Stuart Moss or type in www.mosstravel.tv. Again, if you could subscribe to that channel, it would be hugely appreciated. If you'd like to get Moss Home and Garden updates on Facebook, then please open Facebook and do a search for Moss Home and Garden, and you will find the page. If you like the page, then you will get future updates on there. And if you'd like to connect on Instagram for home, garden and travel photography, as well as some stories, then my username is StuMoss, STUMOSS. If you'd like to connect on Twitter, then my username is @StuartMoss. And if you'd like to contact me about film usage or any other issue, please just email me on stewmosshomegarden@gmail.com. Once again, thank you very much for supporting my channel, for watching my films. I do appreciate it. I'd just like you all to have a great day.